Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back again with Matt Kelly for a special edition of Compliance Into the Weeds. Welcome back, Matt.
Hello, Tom.
Matt, it looks like you're in the auxiliary office of the world headquarters of Radical Compliance. Would that be correct?
That is correct. I am now back home in Boston after spending the first half of the week in Nashville at the Society of Corporate Compliance and Ethics 2025 conference. But it is over. I'm home.
Well, good. I'm glad you're home safe and sound. But what I wanted to do for this special edition was get some of your preliminary thoughts about the event. What was the vibe? What was the feel? What were some of the panels you enjoyed? I know you spoke. And just give us 15 or 20 minutes of Matt on SCCE, CEI 2025.
Well, like as always, it is a good event. You come away from it definitely recharged and energized because the compliance community is very supporting of each other. And it is big enough that it's not small, although not so big that it's too large. For example, I would say there was at least 1,300 people here. I didn't do a close count and I didn't get to ask the SCCE people for a precise number, but easily over 1,000, not 2,000, I don't think, but and that was just in person. And then they do have virtual attendees for most of these sessions as well, because they simulcast it. So the total number of people who participated, I am not clear, but this is a good, large, significant thing. But there's still always ample opportunity to meet somebody else that you already know, or to bump into someone at lunch that you haven't seen, things like that. It is very nice to meet old friends and to make new acquaintances. So I would recommend this conference to anybody who has the time and ability to go if you're a compliance officer, whether you're new, whether you're a veteran. I think next year it's going to be in Orlando. Can't say I like Florida, but for SCCE, I will probably make the sacrifice and travel there. I certainly look forward to going again. All of that said, I think, Tom, the thing that struck me the most was what was not there. And this was a good, robust agenda. We can talk about those sessions momentarily. But what wasn't really present on the agenda was any real substantive representative from the Trump administration to talk about ethics and compliance. There was no senior official from the Justice Department announcing policy proclamations. There was no mid-level Justice Department person there just to talk about how important strong ethics and compliance is. At least I didn't see anyone on the agenda. There were no keynoters to that effect. In the past, for example, we have had the Deputy Attorney General show up numerous times over the years, I think, to announce policy announcements, pronunciations, shifts in the ethics and compliance guidelines. It was 2023 when the Deputy AG, Lisa Monaco, announced the new basically forgiveness policy for mergers and acquisitions. If you find an incident and you report it quickly and you clean it up thereafter, they'll be looking at a declination. Big policy shifts have been announced at this conference in the past. Big names have come in the past. But we are not in the past. We're in the Trump 2.0 administration, which is the upside down world. So I don't even know who would show up and what would they say. I will give credit to one person who did come, I guess, the voice of the federal government. There was a speaker from the FBI who delivered a good keynote on the importance of people cooperating on cybersecurity. And that is an important issue. I don't know exactly how important it is to ethics and compliance people as opposed to a conference of CISOs or general counsels. But he showed up. He gave a speech. People listened. It was an interesting speech. That was it. There were other people who were ex-Justice Department people talking about shifting priorities. There were people who were experts from other regulators around the world, from France, from the United Kingdom, talking about global enforcement. That's good. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say I struggle to see the value in what a lot of Justice or Trump administration people might say, because how are we supposed to take you seriously? Because of who you have in the White House and how erratic your ultimate boss is. And you might come up with a really good, important thing about voluntary self-disclosure, And 2 days later, Trump announces he's going to cut a deal with some political favorite to walk away from any sort of accountability for a corruption act. That's very plausible these days. So why did we waste time listening to some DOJ person? I don't know. Maybe the DOJ knows that, and that's why they're not really speaking as much as they used to. Um, and I, in no way, shape, or form, do I mean to give SCCE a hard time. They bring together the best speakers they can. But in this particular era that we are in with the Trump 2.0 administration, I struggle to see what the value is to listening to a lot of them. That's a sad statement to make. I don't like it. I'll get off my high horse now. I don't know if you have any thoughts about it, but that was the thing that struck me more than anything else, is what wasn't on the agenda was that.
Well, I don't think we're going to see that on the agenda for the next 2.5 years.
Probably
So,
not.
any particular panels that intrigued you, or any maybe nuggets you picked up from any of the formal presentations?
Yes, as much as I just picked on the lack of Justice Department or administration voices, there was a lot of other good stuff, and let me focus on that. One thing that I will praise a lot of the speakers for is they do come up with innovative ways to talk about things we have talked about many times before. How to do an effective risk assessment, how to have good relations between HR and compliance, or among HR, compliance, and legal. There was a session on that that basically was a riff on that old show, Whose Line Is It Anyway? There was another discussion that basically was about getting voted off the island. I didn't go to that one, but I know that was a theme. Um, we should remember that there are 7 elements of an effective compliance program. You can talk about them 7 times, and you can talk about them 7 million times, but the millionth time for each program element, it starts to get stale if you say the same thing over and over. It is a credit to compliance officers that they continually come up with fun and fresh ways to talk about only 7 things, really. And I like that a lot. The other thing that was interesting is that we spent a lot of time talking about emerging risks, and a lot of that is around artificial intelligence. I, for example, attended a session by a big IT services company, TD SYNNEX, one of the largest in the world, where they walked through how they took their policy manual and built their own AI chatbot for employees, so that employees could ask the chatbot, which is named Ethos and is a cute little robotic cartoon avatar that goes with it. But the employees now ask Ethos what a certain policy is, or if they have a hypothetical scenario they're trying to answer, they could feed it into the chatbot and it can give them an answer, cite the proper policy, give a sample of the text of the policy. So they walked through how they actually built it. They built it themselves. They walked through how employees use it, and employees now ask Ethos many more policy questions than the compliance team had historically gotten in the past. Um, but also at the same time, in my take, and eventually I'm going to write up about this, it seemed like the TD SYNNEX people now spend a lot more time building the basic policy infrastructure for the chatbot to do a good job. And now the chatbot talks policy with employees. It talks more about it, and the humans still get the data about what Ethos, the bot, is discussing with employees, but they now have to update their policies more often. They have to make their policies longer, because if you're AI, you need more data to synthesize so you understand the policy. If you're a human, you typically want policies to be shorter so we can consume something down to its core essence. That's a really interesting point about how using AI might be good, but that doesn't necessarily mean you are doing less. It sounded to me like the compliance team at SYNNEX is doing the same amount of volume of work, but the volume has been rearranged. So they're investing more time thinking about policy governance and policy maintenance to support the AI infrastructure, the bot. And the bot then engages with employees, except employees do engage with it much more often. So I guess that's good. But that was a really interesting example of how AI works in the field and takes you to some strange places that I wasn't really expecting. There were a few other discussions around AI risks. They would talk about leadership. We could go from there. It's just an awful lot of really interesting practical examples of how you can think through and improve your program.
Matt, were there any examples you heard about or saw where AI has been incorporated directly into the compliance part of a compliance program as opposed to chatbot for employees, such as a risk assessment, root cause analysis, or any of those types of functions?
I mean, there was some discussion of how you could use AI to do better analytics of, say, your Speak Up program and your internal hotline data. There was some discussion of how you could use it to translate documents more easily and into more languages, which therefore makes your policies or your code of conduct or your whatever more accessible to more people. If you could only afford to have human translators translated into 10 languages, but I know there's at least one AI driven speak up hotline there that can go in, I think, as many as 80 different languages, and you can dial it up. So there's that. Although, Tom, I would say you raise an interesting point. If I'll go back to my TD Synnex example, if they're using AI to build a chatbot that engages with employees, but they're still working a lot to run their compliance program. Like policies and procedures are an important part of the compliance program, and they're using the same AI tool is being used by two different groups at the same time in two different ways: the employees and the compliance team. And so, are they using AI to run their compliance program? You could make that argument that yes, even though the same exact tool is at the same time being used by the employees to ask questions. Like I said, the more you think about how AI is going to transform how digital processes work, it takes you to some interesting questions in strange places I don't think we've ever had to consider before. But yes, I'll get off my high horse about that TD Synnex example for now. But there were other examples of how people are using AI to make their analysis and maintenance of their compliance routines and their compliance data better.
We have a new CEO or president at SCCE. Were you able to either hear his keynote, speak with him, or get any real thoughts around our new prez or the new prez?
The new CEO. So his name is Garth Jordan, and he comes to SCCE and the Healthcare Compliance Association. They are sister organizations run by one organization, governed by one joint board. They collectively picked Mr. Jordan to be the CEO for both. He started 8 days ago as of Monday, so I guess maybe about 10 or 11 days on the job now. He made a brief appearance. He made some good opening remarks that I think struck the right tone to welcome all of the compliance and participants and members of his association. He didn't speak very long, I think maybe about 5 or 10 minutes, just to give a sense of who he was, who he is. He is from Denver, and he is a self proclaimed tree hugger. Good for him. We need more of them in the world. But he gave a very good curtain raiser sort of a speech about how, as a tree hugger, he was visiting Japan not long ago, where he saw a now famous bonsai tree that started, I guess, small, but these days is as big as a house and is in the shape of a ship and is 600 years old, which means that it needed a constant tending by bonsai tree groomers to shape and direct the or growth of the whole parent organization, the tree, into a certain shape that each individual tree trimmer was never going to see the final product. But over the centuries, as they passed down their knowledge and dedication from one generation to the next, over 600 years, this tree has now blossomed into a very famous, very large bonsai tree that looks like a ship. And he said, we compliance professionals essentially do the same thing with corporate organizations, that each compliance officer doesn't really grow the tree so much as you nurture the tree to make sure it grows in the right direction. You're never going to see a final version. You're never going to have a perfect company. You're never going to have a perfect tree, but you are there to help it grow in the right way while you can and pass those beliefs and knowledge on to the next one as you leave. Very nice, poignant metaphor, and a good way for Mr. Jordan to ingratiate himself with his new members. And he got a nice round of applause at the end. But and I know that he did then do the appropriate schmoozing with other people, more important than me. I am not important in the grand scheme of things. But he did have a meeting, I think, with a advisory council, and went and glad handled with the appropriate people. And seems like a nice enough guy.
All right. Well, I assume you'll be blogging about this as well.
I have 2 posts up so far, including the usual roundup of social media dispatches, just kind of snippets in case you're looking for a sense of what you might have missed if you did not attend, some photos, things like that. But there was a lot of good stuff. I'm glad I went, and I would endorse it for any compliance officers if you're looking for somewhere to go in the future.
Well, Matt, thank you. I look forward to visiting with you on Friday for our Everything Compliance recording, and then next Monday for our next episode of the award-winning Compliance Into the Weeds.
Thanks, Tom.